I actually think permaculture is very spiritual. It's very clear we're not supposed to be teaching spirituality as part of permaculture, because if we teach that part, someone can reject what it's teaching based on belief. And this isn't about belief. These are hard systems. This is how water moves. This is how food grows. This is how a house works. There's no room for disagreement. And so we don't teach spirituality. But everyone who takes the deep dive into studying permaculture starts to realize everything is one. Alan Watts has this great quote: "We come out of this world like leaves from a tree, like waves from an ocean." And I think people don't feel that way. That's because we weren't taught that. We were taught we were separate from this world. I think the education system can do a much better job at teaching the fundamentals of life, that we are the soil. The soil becomes our food, the food becomes us, and we become the soil again, both in our daily lives and when we die.
If you could give a tip or two to people that are building their home now, what should they do in regards to the water?
The call to action is quite clear. Slow the water down, store it, and soak it. And we have an opportunity as water designers to take the chaos out of water moving fast and slow it down. And when we do that, it creates life.
Can you give us a few tips on how it's better to grow your own food here in the tropics?
Hey, there's a forest right outside this window, and it self-propagates, self-waters, self-fertilizes. Could we make food do the same thing? And the answer is yes. And this is a call to action right here and right now. This is needed. People need food. That's not going away. People need homes. That's not going away. People need community. That's not going away. And we can become architects of those things.
Welcome everyone to the 5th episode of the YokoVillage Podcast. Today we have the honor to share some time with a very special guest, Kenton Zerbin. Hi, Kenton.
My pleasure to be here.
Thank you for blessing us with your presence today. Kenton is a permaculture expert, a teacher, a consultant. You're going to teach us about regeneration, how to live beyond sustainable lifestyle, correct?
Yeah, we use the word permaculture, but no one knows what that means. So sustainability seems to be the buzzword.
By the way, where does the word permaculture stems for?
You know, it's actually interesting. It's had a history. When it first began, it meant permanence in agriculture. And it was all about the study of the growth of food. And so we studied how indigenous people around the world grew food, and we copied it, so to say, and put it into a book. And then that was like a guidebook for how to grow food around the world. But as the movement grew, it suddenly became much bigger than just food. It was like, how do you create other systems? You know, a community system, a home system, and business systems, any kind of system. And so then it meant permanence in culture, which I think is kind of interesting because we teach about cycles and nothing's permanent. So it's kind of almost like an oxymoron at this point.
Beautiful. Oh, so tell me your story. How did you become what you are today? How did you go through the teaching path?
Well, I actually have a very interesting upbringing. My father was a police officer. My mother was a social worker. I grew up with two very, very strong, kind-hearted, giving human beings as role models. And so as I grew up and kind of went, well, how do I give back to my world? I was good with kids. I'm an uncle like 20 times over. So I was like, why not become an elementary teacher? And I did the schooling for it, and I hit the system. And the first job I actually got was teaching high school art. But I started to question, why are we teaching what we're teaching to kids today? And I didn't have a good answer. So I had to start looking for something else to teach. And that's when I came across permaculture. And I was like, this right here, this is life on earth. This is a body of science dedicated to how do we flourish. And it's nowhere to be found in the school system.
So if you would change one thing in the schooling system, what would it be?
Just one? All right.
Well, the whole thing. How would you change it?
Well, let's start with one, because otherwise we'll be here all day. I would say one thing that I would instill or bring to the education system is the teaching of the cycles of life. That we as human beings are the land. Alan Watts has this great quote, "We come out of this world like leaves from a tree, like waves from an ocean." And I think people don't feel that way. It's because we weren't taught that. We were taught we were separate from this world. And I think the education system can do a much better job at teaching the fundamentals of life, that we are the soil. The soil becomes our food, the food becomes us, and we become the soil again, both in our daily lives and when we die. And we know this. We say we're stardust, we're all dinosaurs, because we are the same material. But we don't actually, I think, have that instilled through the schooling system. It doesn't reflect as a part of our lives. I think we would live very differently if we knew all our interactions and how we treated the land was actually how we treat ourselves.
You know, you get me excited. You came here last year to Yoko Connect, and you gave such a brilliant talk about permaculture and sustainable living, and gave all these amazing tips. Maybe you can share with us 3 tips for building a sustainable home in the tropics, right here in Santa Teresa.
Absolutely. It'd be my pleasure. And that was such a blessing to be here, by the way. That was such a random story how I came here. We have to come back to that because that's a story to itself. But let's say 3 tips. So 3 tips for living in the tropics. The first thing is that every house in the tropics should have a really good hat. You know, when you see someone who's got one of those big, sombrero, like, there's a reason why those Japanese rice hats are so big. There's a reason why those sombreros are so big. It casts shade on you, making you cooler. And yet when we look at how we design our homes, we sometimes have these really skimpy awnings. And then the sun can get past them, hit our walls, warm up the inside of our house, come in the windows, and it turns our houses into an oven. And we would never stand outside in the full sun without shade or some way to stay cool. And it's such a simple way. Before AC, before anything else, just stick an awning, the part that sticks out past the window. You can even add them to each of your windows, just to bring more shade to your house. So that's number 1. Number 2 would be strategic placement of windows. We shouldn't be putting windows on the western side of a tropical house because as the sun goes into the latter half of the day, the whole landscape is hot. So putting a glass window that turns your house into an oven on the side of the house that's going to get getting a lot of heat when you don't want it, that's stupidity. That sounds like a very high AC bill or a lot of sweat. So that's number 2 is decrease the western windows and use the north and south and east windows carefully, strategically. And then my 3rd tip has to do with moisture management. We need to make sure we have good ventilation built onto our houses. And that includes, yes, for just cooking and showering, get that moisture out. But we can be better than that. We can pull that air from somewhere else. For example, if we have a space under our house or we know an area that's shady or cool, we can make an opening that pulls air from that space. So as we have a fan pulling air out of our house, it pulls air from that location. So basically you're using nature as an AC unit instead of electricity.
You live in a off-grid home, right? That you kind of built, and I saw some solar. I saw a bunch of plantations, different things there. It looks so unique. Can you tell me a little bit about the experience of actually be a person that's doing that? Because, man, a lot of people are talking, but you're walking the talk. How does that feel? What's the difference in that type of living than what we're all experiencing right now?
Yeah, there's numerous things to talk about there. One is going tiny and minimal, which I think is a very important lesson into itself. When we have a house that's too big, then what we have to do is we have to pay a lot of money to pay it off, right? So to work a long time, which means we're out of that house. We need to fill that house with more stuff, so to work more to fill up that space. And then we need to climate control it to keep it comfortable. And often we're doing that also while we're not there. So going big doesn't make a lot of sense from a financial perspective, from an environmental perspective, or an efficiency perspective. Not everyone needs to go tiny like I did. My house is 260 square feet. I don't know what the exact conversion is to square meters, but it's 28 feet long, and the inside of it is only 8 feet wide. It's basically what most people would consider an RV. So the house is small. It's very, very small. But it has all the things that I need for the basics of my life. And what I love about it is it allowed me to build a house in my mid-20s and not have any debt. So suddenly I could turn my life's energy and attention to how do I want to exist in this world and help other people. And so it changed my life. It absolutely enabled and transformed it. Where I think most people live for their homes, my home helps me live. So that's what I'd say about tiny homes. That might inspire some people, but I have to also be cautious and say it's not for everybody.
Yeah, it's for young people who are looking to get housing, and it's so tough these days.
So tough.
And it's much better to just get your own place and not aspire for something you're never going to get, or you might have to destroy your world as you get there. And I feel like I'm kind of coming from that place because I was very unconscious in the past about spaces, and the more I see also older people towards the end of their lives, they don't need the big house. They want to go into something small that they could actually clean themselves and be independent. It's interesting. There are so many things that come into these factors of actually living in a sustainable manner and permaculture. One of the things that we're having a hard time here in Santa Teresa is that it's very rainy, and we have all the water in the world for about 8 months of the year. But then the other 4 months, it's so dry here. And we kind of got you to come here and help us figure out how we can use better the water that we have.
And absolutely. I feel like water, if there was one like subject area of permaculture that I'd say that we focus on, most people think of us as like a gardening movement, which I think is kind of funny. We're way more than a gardening movement. The government maybe thinks we're a gardening movement, which we're fine. We're talking societal change here. But one of the key things that whether a garden or a house or a community all comes back to water. So we really focus about water design. How do we design a watershed? How do we collect the water off our roofs? How do we take the water away from our homes, gray water, and reuse it? All of this is all about water. So I think you guys have an amazing opportunity, actually. Honestly. Okay, so if you have a section of the year when you have a lot of water, and then another time when you have it not enough, usually you get this surge then that's moving through, and it causes a lot of erosion. And you look at the topography of Costa Rica, especially on the coast, and you really see that. The amount of water cuts. It creates steep hillsides. It creates ravines and valleys that are very steep, right? And that's the pattern of water. If you let it run its course with force, it will always do that, and it will turn a whole landscape flat. And we have an opportunity as water designers to take the chaos out of water moving fast and slow it down. And when we do that, it creates life. So water's powerful. When it's fast, it cuts, it washes away, it floods, it damages. When it slows down, it goes into the soil. It becomes springs that spring out of the ground. It becomes water to life, to roots. So the call to action is quite clear. Slow the water down, store it, and soak it. And when we do that higher up on a landscape, like we have in this topography of Costa Rica, we can create bodies of water that stay there and they slowly drain. And your 4 months of the year now, where you're dry, you can have water held up from the wet season that slowly makes its way down. So you have water the whole time.
I was asking you earlier today about how we could do this at Yoko, and emphasizing it gets so dry and hot. Everything dries, all the rivers dry here, and it's just for a few months before all that water comes back again. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that we could build a few ponds in different altitudes, and essentially maybe 1 or 2 will dry out, but the third one will give us water throughout the whole year. I'm very curious because there are many community builders in Costa Rica and that are going through different challenges about how to store water. Would you say that creating a solution of various ponds to store water is something that is doable here?
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a good way to explain water storage. When we look at the economics of storing water, the most expensive place to store it is in tanks. And that's our go-to solution.
And that's what we always do.
I know. It's the most expensive way per liter to store water. The next one is in the ground as bodies of water. So dams and ponds. You cost a lot of money to bring in an excavator or bring in, maybe you got a pond liner, maybe you got to bring in clay. There's different techniques for how do you build a pond. But cost per liter, it's cheaper than the tanks. The third is in the soil. And that goes back to my previous thing I was talking about, that if we slow that water down, that water could be held by the land instead of in a cup that we're building out of earth. I think we should use all three. And we're not seeing that enough around the world. I think we can be doing a better job at putting it in the soil, creating life, and creating a thriving ecosystem that we live off of the interest of. I love this analogy, by the way, that the land is a bank account. People understand financial sustainability. You can't live off a bank account and keep taking out more and more without putting something in. Otherwise, you hit the red and you're bankrupt. The land is the same way. Are we taking from the land more than we're giving? Because if we give more to it, especially with water, it can give back in interest. And if we can find the way to live off that interest, that is true sustainability.
That is beautiful. When you say it, it seems so easy. we have here at Yoko today almost 70 families that are still planning to build their homes. After we've built the first few homes, we've learned a lot. And one of the reasons why we winded up connecting is because we are on the search of figuring out solutions for better water management. And when you see Santa Teresa for its climate and the other developments, how do you think, if you could give a tip or two to people that are building their home now, what should they do in regards to the water? You get this area, usually an average parcel here is about 1.2 acres or 5,000 square meters, right? What should we do? Because people usually just come in, they build a water well, and then after that, sometimes the well gets dry. They need to pay for water trucks, or the community, like us, is doing a water project. But what can we do as a community now that we are not just, separated homes, or if we even had a separate home outside of this community, what can we do to increase the livelihood of our water? I mean, we have water treatment plants, but sometimes I feel like they're not always that useful. What else can we do as people, not as rich, capable professionals, or perhaps we can hire you, right? But
I got a bunch of tips, but let's start broad for a second and make this fun, because I think that's very important. I think people sometimes feel browbeaten with sustainability. Be better, take shorter showers, turn off the lights, be less bad. And I think we need to change that conversation to be good and feel good about being good. And one of the ways I like teaching people about water management is to think like a child. Those children, they had their marble mazes. You take the marble and you put it at the top, and the marble goes all the way down. So much fun. That's like water. If we have a piece of land, it has a high point and it has a low point. That's where the marble begins and that's where the marble ends. And it's really boring as a kid if you just take your marble and drop it in open air and it hits the table. That's not fun. But that's the extent of most people's water planning. They don't think about how to make that water go woo and have a fun time with it.
I mean, what we have is some people put a water tank a little bit on top, but what?
Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
So here's the top. It's the roof of the house. You could have a flat piece of land and you still have a house with a high point. Okay, from that gutter that comes off that roof, you can put a tank in the air. Now that water goes into the tank and you capture it high. Now it's gravity water you can use in your garden without a pump. You can have that tank in the air on a stand, and now that's your garden shed underneath. And now you got a place that you can store things. You're getting double function out of that structure you built. Okay, so now it goes to your garden and it becomes not just a simple garden system. You can make your walkway going through that garden have a weeping tile or a French drain system, if you know what that is. You have gravel, you have a pipe, and you can drop the water through your walkway. And if your garden slowly goes downhill and your walk system goes like this, to water your whole garden, just water your walkway. And that water will trickle through all the soil to the bottom of the garden beds right next to them, instead of spraying from the top and losing all the water by evaporation. Let's say we have a little spot at the bottom of the property where we now put a little tiny pond. It could be something really small. That's that last point where you can capture the water that we had from this roof to tank to garden. If any of it didn't get used, we're going to catch it there because we can reuse it.
I'm just thinking maybe like all this roof could like also bring the water directly to my water well and fill it up.
Sure.
Every now and then when we get rain in the middle of the summer.
Yes.
All right, let's do it. Let's talk about something else for a minute, which is another thing, electricity. It is so expensive here. It's getting more and more expensive. And now there's battery packs, there's solar. Solar in Costa Rica costs more money than it costs in Canada and the US. And a lot of people are not doing solar because of the price. And what can you help us understand a little bit your point of view about solar energy at this moment?
Sure, absolutely. So I'd say that solar energy is often seen as quite a poster child of sustainability. And I think it has a lot of potential and we definitely need power. But to go back to the money analogy, it's much easier to save money than it is to make money. And so most people are looking at living off grid or having solar panels. The most cost-effective way to begin is to reduce your energy use. So if we go back to linking some of the things we just talked about, an awning over your windows makes the house more comfortable, which requires less AC. And so cost per dollar, the awning will be cheaper than the solar panel. So there's a way to tie all this information together. And that's one of the reasons I love permaculture is it's not one area. It's the study of all life, all systems. How do we be generalists again so we can make wholesome systems, not separated ones? We're not talking just specialists.
So for example, walls. I just built a house with walls from barreque, which are made from mud and soil and straw and bamboo or wood. And that is... now I'm going to experience it because I'm moving there next week. It's supposed to reduce the temperature a little bit and have the house cooler. What other things we could save in order to consume less electricity?
Mm-hmm. Well, the wall that you just described is actually part of that holistic solution. So if we have good shade and then we have good windows and then we have good thermal mass, that's what you're talking about there. You have an earthen wall that's dense and heavy, and that allows it to absorb the ambient temperature from around it. And so during the day, if you don't put sun on it, it's staying cool because it's carrying the temperature from the night. So this way, yes, you need less electricity to cool your home because you're borrowing from the time of the day when you want that temperature into the hot times. So that's a good example right there about interconnectedness and how we put our systems together. And yeah, they'll reduce electricity. Yeah. I think there's so many tips and tricks that go into how to reduce electricity, and most of it's not rocket science. It's the appliance and knowing the numbers, it's reducing them. Another one is phantom power. Everything that's plugged in is always using power. So there's special plugins you can get that if they aren't asking for a current load, they're not an open loop for power to move through. So this way you're not actually using power when you're not using your appliance. So there are little tips all over the place of how to reduce. And to go back, though, to like living off grid and solar panels, I would say, again, there's a lot of idealism around living off grid. I have a 3 kilowatt solar system on my tiny house, and it meets my needs and my partner's. But most people would struggle, I think, on a 3 kilowatt solar system. And if you build a good 3 kilowatt solar system, it's expensive. So most people bulk, or they kind of like shy away from committing to living solar because they want a cheaper solar, install cost and material cost, but then they don't succeed at it. It's kind of like, I want to be fit, so I will buy one vegetable. Well, I'm sorry, it's not part of the whole solution how to be healthy. You need a little bit more going on. So I would say solar is a great place to have this sustainability conversation, but it can't end there. It's got to be much bigger.
It's much bigger than that. I get it. Over here, we always dream about growing our own food. And not everything grows here. It's great for papaya, mango, banana, right? Lime, coconuts, a bunch of avocados.
Citrus, guava, yes, star fruit.
And while I planted all these fruit trees around our community and also around my home, I'm still having a hard time to enjoy these fruits because they just come so often. And now you've been helping us to build a greenhouse and a tree nursery. Can you give us a few tips about how you can grow how it's better to grow your own food here in the tropics?
Absolutely. So to do that, I need to explain a little bit about how the different climates of the world produce food. In the tropics, you have a cycle of endless life. Right? You've got all of the sunlight. You've got a lot of water. Yeah, you have times you don't, but life is still kicking and moving still. Versus if you go to some place where it gets cold, life goes through this boom and bust. You have this time of abundant food, and then you harvest, and then you weather into the cold times of the year. And I think this is very important because regardless which one you are, you still have this time when the food is around and we need to preserve it, and you need to prepare for the times you may not have as much. So some things, yes, they fruit regularly. Other times, it's not the time to be growing fruit as much. We still have to practice the art of preservation, refrigeration, dehydration, using salt to preserve, using canning, fermenting. There's so many ways to make our food last. So I would say from the beginning point, we have to go, what does my landscape provide? Because if my landscape provides this kind of sustenance, I need to base my lifestyle around it. And if you live in northern Canada, that usually means you have to have protein. You're not living a vegetarian lifestyle. in northern Canada. But in the tropics, that's a lot more possible. So let's start that there and lay that groundwork, because I'm not sure where the listeners are coming in from, and there's no universal answer here. But what I would say for here in the tropics is that cycle of endless abundance is best designed into what I call a food forest. So how do we go, hey, there's a forest right outside this window, and it self-propagates, self-waters, self-fertilizes. That's great. Could we make food do the same thing? And the answer is yes. We can take the same structure and process and time scale of what that does and substitute species. So this one makes this one does this one has medicine, this one's our fuel, this one's our fiber, this one's our food. And suddenly you have this bounty all around you that's constantly producing. And yes, sometimes it's more and sometimes it's less. And the art of living is how to live with that pulse.
So essentially the art of living in permaculture is almost the same thing.
Yes.
How can we make everyone change their habits? Do you have any any poetry or inspiration? By the way, I'm asking you hard questions now.
Yeah.
I heard that from somebody here from my staff that you're writing a book, right? Is that right?
Yeah. So as a teacher, I'm always looking for how do I have the most maximum amount of impact. That's what what makes me go to sleep at night and have hope for the world is humans can change really quickly. That fad effect, like fashion, quick fashion. Someone makes up some fashion thing, and before you know it's around all the world. That same kind of a phenomena can be applied to humans, and we've seen it before. So how can we teach people and have that spread? I've been trying to find the right way to spread it as fast as possible. And so I've done a YouTube series, I've taught, live courses, I've done online courses, I've got poetry around sustainability. And yes, I started writing a book. And the book is it's called Dear Human. And so it's actually a series of short chapters, instructional in nature, on how do we live on Earth. So it's got 3 parts. Part 1 is, Dear Human, welcome to planet Earth. It's very much like, how do you live in this very physical place? And then part 2 is, welcome, Dear Human, to community. And that has to do with relationships between humans and the other creatures. And then part 3 is, how do you live with yourself? That there's this very intimate relationship that you have to have before you can hope to carry that to your larger circle around you, and then to your whole planet.
So it has a little bit of a Buddhism approach into it, I can sense.
Yes, a little bit. When I was in university, I did study the history of Buddhism and did some Buddhism art history classes.
It's beautiful. I can relate to Buddhism more than I can relate to Judaism. I come from. Definitely, it's more sustainable, right? There's more permaculture in the Buddhist.
And you know what's interesting about this is spirituality is such a hot topic in the world, right? Like people are very charged about it, whether they're atheist or agnostic or they're this religion or that religion. Mine's better, yours is wrong, da-da-da-da-da. But at the end of the day, I actually think permaculture is very spiritual. Now, it's almost it's very clear we're not supposed to be teaching spirituality as part of permaculture, because if we teach that part, someone can reject what it's teaching based on belief. And this isn't about belief. These are hard systems. This is how water moves. This is how food grows. This is how a house works. There's no room for disagreement. And so we don't teach spirituality. But everyone who takes the deep dive into studying permaculture starts to realize everything is one. You study soil and you can't help but understand that the carrot is the soil, and that the carrot then is you, and you are your feces, and the feces goes back to the soil. And so where is the boundary between each one? We like to separate things, for human understanding. We say, this is your nose, this is your cheek, these are your eyes. Where does the beginning and end of these things? They all blend. And so I think that's something that happens for most people who study permaculture, is they start to see, it's all connected in a very scientifically proven way. Not woo-woo-y. Not like, we're all kumbaya. No. Like, straight up, we are one.
That's That is amazing. I'm so happy we're doing this. So, you've done you're helping us now. You've done some other project. Can you share with the audience what maybe three of the most enticing, interesting community projects that you've done in previously?
So I'm going to share three, and they're actually kind of connected. Let's start with the first one because it's inspiring and everyone can do it. I heard of this game, and this game is called the Red Paperclip or Something from Nothing. And a guy did it in the States, in Canada, and what he did is he started with a red paperclip, and he said, hey, I have a paperclip. Who wants to trade me something, anything for this paperclip? But I want it to be bigger or better. And someone said, I have a pen. I gave him a pen for paperclip. And he went to the pen, and he went to something else, and something else. In 15 trades, he went to a house. A house. He went from a paperclip to a house with 15 barter trades, saying, I have this thing. Who wants it? Give me something in return. And he got to a house at the end of those 15 trades. So I went, hey, could I play this game? Could I do this for community? And so I did it. I started with a paperclip. And I traded all the way up to a tool trailer. A tool trailer that then we filled with tools that the community gave me so that we could make edible landscapes. So we could pull this tool trailer to someone's property, to a park, to a church, to a public landscape, pull the tools out, and then as a group of people, plant trees, build gardens, and make an edible landscape together.
Wow.
So that's number one. Number two is one of the times we used that tool trailer was for a school. What a better place to plant food than at a school. So I've done 2 schools now like this where we did a flash mob. I call it also another good idea.
What is that? What do you mean?
A flash mob, you see it in like social media where like there'll be a group of people or one person like start dancing in the mall. And then like 5 people will join in and they're all choreographed. And then suddenly there's 100 people and you're like, there's no way they all know this dance. They planned it ahead of time. It's called a flash mob. I use the same idea for this way of like building an edible landscape. It's like you invite a whole bunch of people out, and one of the schools, we hit 80 people. 80 people all building a garden and planting trees for kids to eat and learn and grow in an edible landscape that wasn't just grass. So that's number 2. Number 3 has to be one of the projects I've done to build a house for free. So I learned through all of this social pioneering, we'll say, that I was doing, that it's all about relationships. What can you do for someone else so that they can do something for you? And if you can think in that way, you can make anything happen because you're not forcing it. You're enabling someone else's success by letting them help you succeed.
A win-win dynamic.
So I did that by building a house. I said, okay, I have a tiny house. I know how to build a house. I teach people how to build houses. I'll reach out to companies and say, hey, I teach people about homes. How would you like to give me some of your product so I can build a house? And I'm going to film that whole process, celebrate your product, and then give the house away. I built a whole house for free that we still haven't given away yet. So if people want to learn how to win that house, they can look up the Tiny House Master Plan. And I have a whole YouTube series showing how we built it.
That's an amazing approach. A guy starts his business career wanting to grow. It starts with nothing, winds up later on with a lot more. How did that happen? It's a lot of barter there, a lot of win-win dynamics, and yeah. I guess that's a lot of what you represent. I love that.
Social capital, I think what you're saying there too. Yeah, you build relationships.
Yeah, I love it. That's what we're always doing, and I find these relationships are the most wonderful assets we could have more than anything else, because everything is so passing anyway. Mm-hmm. This has been so much fun. One of the things that makes me feel good, I was calculating, I like to eat 2 eggs every day. Most humans, I believe, like to eat between 1 and 2 eggs every day. So I thought, okay, I eat 700 eggs a year. And then I started thinking, how many eggs does a chicken lay every day? And apparently it's around 1. A chicken lays 1 egg per day. So every day, 2 chickens are serving me with an egg. Since we built that chicken coop, I started thinking about this. And I thought, wow, I don't need to go to the supermarket to buy eggs anymore. and nobody's spending money to bring those eggs on a truck to me or store them in a fridge. And so getting more connected to the animals, even if we're not vegan, which most of us are not. And I think that one of the things that we're very passionate here is how can we try to be a little bit more autonomous. And I think with what you bring, we have a chance to somewhat slowly get there.
You're already on the journey. It starts with the values, and the means come after the point, right? The intent. You have to set intent and say, I want to be there. And then you get there, visualization.
Kenton, if you could just say, so what are the things, so for the audience, if somebody wants to get your expertise, what do you currently teach? And who do you usually teach, or who are the people that hire you?
Absolutely. So about 50% of my income comes from teaching. The other 50% comes from consulting. And I love both. I really do. Seeing the whites of people's eyes and helping them one-on-one to make their own custom solutions for their home and property. I love nothing more. A lot of my clients, they'll hire me. I'll come in for a weekend or a week and just give them my eyes and my brain and say, this is what I would do if I was you. I'd put the food here, I'd put the garden here, I'd put the food forest here, rain tanks here. Here's 10 things you probably never heard about or never thought about. Here's why I wouldn't do this. Here's why I would. And they get a lot of value out of that. And some of those clients then say, I want you on my team. I want you to help project manage. I want to help install. And so, there's a wide variety of services and scaffolding for helping people. Sometimes it's just a phone call. And I'm happy for that too. So people can definitely find me through my one main website called Attainable Sustainable Academy. And I started that up because of the teaching sphere, where I was like, okay, I need to provide more of a home base where people can learn from me and join courses and take in-person experiences. And so right now we have 7-day retreats that we offer at different places around the world. At the time of this recording, we have one in Colombia coming up, and you and I are planning hopefully for one for next year here. And I have another one in Canada this spring. Otherwise, I have an online course. That's my basic program on there, which is all about this permaculture business. How do you start designing your home, your property, your lifestyle? It's the crash course on life. So that's a good place, again, for someone to really start. If they want the free stuff, though, they'll find it too. I've got lots of video recordings, podcasts, all that stuff.
Every time we had a conversation, I found myself and it's all about the habits. Like you mentioned me earlier today about compost, and we need to feed the compost to the chickens now, and how do you what kind of a tool do you use to compost, because there's all these other options, and there's you even mentioned something like chicken trailer, did you?
Yeah, chicken tractor.
Well,
I think that's actually a great example again of permaculture. It's all about relationships and connection. If we draw one theme from everything we've said in this podcast, it's in connection, right? Connection of the water to the land to the food, connection of us to each other, connection of trades with barter to get to a tool trailer, connection between me and sponsors to build a house. It's all about connection. And so we look at a chicken and we go, okay, I want your eggs. What do you want? And we can give things to a chicken that we can't eat. We can make a few things just planted around our property that chickens will love. And all we have to do now is, as we're walking over, cut a little bit of foliage, throw it over to them. And we can build a coop for them that is on wheels, that moves. Because one of the things that they do is they scratch and they poop. And if we don't take advantage of it, it becomes a problem. If you keep in the same spot, they'll kill everything, right? Nothing can grow where they're scratching and pooping all the time. But if you move it over, boom, you have a garden spot. You have a spot to plant a tree. It's rich in fertilizer. It's de-weeded. It's de-seeded. It's beautiful. So chicken tractors on wheels just makes sense. I don't know why we ever started building them so permanent.
The idea of changing your habits to live in the permaculture way, the sustainable way, and have a relationship with everything, so that we keep things green and efficient, is something that I think everybody's exciting for, but everybody's afraid to do this. And how do we change our habits? So I definitely, I'm grateful for you that you came here and you showed us so many things, and now we need to go and implement them. And I wish we had you here all the time.
We'll have to keep talking.
We'll definitely keep on. Thank you so much. This has been it's truly inspiring. And I hope that we could see you with many more communities, because everybody needs a Kenton. That's
Let's train them up. Let's get more of them. Honestly, we need more people who are trained in permaculture, and that's just the end of the day. I can only travel around so much, and same with the people who taught me. I think there's an opportunity for people to find an income and a livelihood that they can truly be proud of. You know, again, going back to that financial sustainability, a lot of people, I think, have a hard time at the end of the day being like, I don't know, how am I doing? What's my net impact relative to the planet? And this is a call to action right here and right now. This is needed. People need food. That's not going away. People need homes. That's not going away. People need community. That's not going away. And we can become architects of those things. So call to action. We need more people trained in it. Let's do it. Let's get them trained.
We need this education, yes, and we want it. Thank you so much, Kenton.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.